Yurt. Did Donnie blow Bubba's saxophone? Does Mike like tugging on Johnson's? Did Charlie play with dolls? These aren't pressing questions, but our fascination with men who have discrete queer encounters is, well, fascinating. And for good reason. There's a trend of those interested in the sneaky link, as it were, perpetuating bigotry at their worst, and at their best pretending their dalliance with the friends of Dorothy didn't happen. And that's what I want to talk about. The who's, the what's, and most importantly, the why behind the down low, or as most people will understand it, the closet. And before we get started, a special thanks to my patrons for the continued support. They got this video a couple days early along with some additional features like helping me pick out some thumbnails along with some other early access materials. Link is in the description. Lowest tier starts at $1. Also, if you guys wouldn't mind giving the video a like and a share, it really does help the channel. It helps the algorithm know that people like my video and that they should show it to other people. Without you guys' continued support in and out of Patreon, the entire YouTube community, I wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you all. Thanks. Now, to get anywhere with this, it's only fair to start at the top, or rather the bottom, and dig deep into the history of man. A history that for our sake will begin in the Roman and Greek empires. And I'm not splitting the two because for the sake of this specific argument, there aren't that many differences. Just a whole lot of togas and butt stuff. The Greek and Roman obsession over the peak male form has been something that is fascinating because for all the interest that Western white men have with Roman history, they always ignore the gay parts. But for all the conquests and battles that are ascribed to Roman or Greek men, they conquered booty too. It's been our understanding that freeborn male Romans had the civil liberty to do as they pleased when it came to sexual activity, and as such, the concept of a Roman man engaging in homosexual sex is in no way controversial or taboo to the Romans as long as it fell within certain parameters. Basically, so long as you were atop the perceived dominant position, there is less scrutiny involved in your personal dalliances. The problem is, as we'll get into in a bit, revolves around predatory behavior, something that's been ascribed to queerness when it should be associated with men and the power dynamics. Because even that vague top and bottom dynamic I mentioned has been simplified to undermine its initial readings. In truth, the histories reveal a condemnation not merely of adult passivity or effeminacy, but for an institution of pederasty more general. Passivity and effeminacy were not the root of the problem, but the logical consequence and the most extreme manifestation of the problem, even as today child molestation and AIDS serves as the most potent image for what is really a broader field of all homosexuality. Pederasty was an ethical crux for the Greeks, even as homosexuality in general is an ethical and political crux in the present day. Its practitioners were often apologetic, its opponents censorious or derisive. It was never, at least in classical Athens, unproblematic. In other words, even in Greek and Roman societies, the down low or the closet would have existed. But even then, the higher focus on this dominant versus effeminate, yada yada yada, was really just couched in a bunch of dominant dudes leaning on effeminate boys. And you see how that shifts to keep the perverts in power? Hang on to that. Which is why from Athens to Sparta, there's a prevailing history of what we would now probably refer to as queer intimacy. The problem is, there's a few with a limited grasp of history that will assume that it was just the foppish cities and their aristocrats in these sneaky links, as it were, and while yes, they were getting it in private bathhouses, the Spartans, well, there's no easy way to say it. The Spartans groomed and assaulted their child soldiers who passed on the lessons to child soldiers under their care. The Spartans had this mandatory training camp called the Agage. Spartan boys entered at around age 7 and would stop being students at around age 21. It was insanely brutal and violent. The Agage deliberately deprived boys of food, sleep, and shelter. It involved cultivating loyalty to Sparta through military training or pain tolerance. Participants were required to live in an open or in barracks and were restricted from contact with birth families or wives. There would have been ritual beatings, and the boys were even encouraged to use violence against each other. This included sexual violence by Hebontes against the Pleiades, and I'm just going to pronounce these wrong and move on, but think of these as two different ranks of soldiers, like a lieutenant coming after a privates. Now, some pseudo-historians and several alphas who have already clicked off this video will argue that it was more about domination and less about sex, but considering they were using their genitals, I think it was pretty sexual. This, as it were, can be considered the beginning of our understanding of the down low phenomena. Remember, it's not gay if they're of a lower class standing or if they're a child soldier under the care of former child soldiers. Now hold on to that thought, because as we go forward, you'll notice a pattern of not only those speaking the loudest being more likely to exploit the exact people they claim to protect, but they're also usually pretty fucking gay and projecting their own deviance onto regular queer folk just living their lives. You think I'm bluffing? The church, the school, and the military. Three institutions meant to protect faith children in the homeland are full to the brim with the exact type of people that shouldn't be in positions of power or near children. The right would tell you they need to get the queer teachers away from kids while allowing said kids to live in a fog in regards to their own gender identity and understanding of their bodies as they hit puberty. But habitually, what teachers, staff, and other adult figures get caught in deviant acts? Usually a cishet male, like all of these guys who are mostly conservative. And if you knew the amount of down low white dads with conservative bios in my DMs now, and especially when I was younger, your fucking head would spin. And for good reason, they maintain discrete identities because it's either illegal, predatory, or morally reprehensible. But I'll get into that in a moment, and just remind yourself that it's an illusion that they put up to protect themselves from harm. Now, the military. Shit, y'all, the military is so gay. Like, so gay. But because we live in a society that deems it impossible to be both gay and tough, all the gay is pushed down with the help of people like P.D. Kegsbreath, a degenerate drunk who has literally zero credentials for the job he's advocating for, trying to ban gay sex like that's ever stopped it before, but I'll get to that in a minute. But for the near 20% of women and 5 to 6% of men who experience sexual assault in the military by other service members, you think the priorities would be on that. Now, DoD data estimates between 6 and 8% for women, but based on what I can glimpse from those with insider knowledge, that number is a small fraction of reported cases. And I could fill an independent video with the stats I pulled, but let's just say it's bad. Marrying survey data with administrative records allowed DoD to examine 3 mental health related outcomes over time, including mental health related diagnoses, mental health related encounters, utilization of health services, and mental health related prescriptions. In sum, members who indicated experiencing sexual assault on the survey had poorer career and health outcomes than members who did not indicate having sexual assault experience. Some of the key findings for warfighters experiencing sexual assault are as follows: up to 1.7 times more likely to separate from active duty, up to 2.2 times more likely to be demoted, and up to 2.4 times more likely to receive a derogatory clearance action. And mind you, that data only tracks victims of assault, not perpetrators. So if all that could happen and you did nothing wrong, how many people do you think stay silent? But no, this dickhead that can barely do a chin up is too busy criticizing military fitness and debt naming real service members to attempt any real growth. But the church. The church is the institution that not only is home to increased presence of homosexuality and root deviance that's placed upon queer people, but is also the justification for bigotry across the board. Because God ordained it, because it's a sin in the Bible, because it's sacrilegious. But as I mentioned in my Femboys and Fascism video, our understanding of sin in relation to homosexuality has been twisted. When you peel back the layers of translation and historical context, the Bible does not explicitly condemn homosexuality. It condemns exploitation. The term masculine in early Latin text refers to a male child, not a grown man. In Hebrew and Greek, similar pairings of ish, man, and zakar, boy, refer to age and power, not orientation. The prohibitions weren't about 2 consenting adults sharing love. They're about grown men preying upon boys, a reflection of patriarchal abuse and class hierarchy, not queerness. See aforementioned Spartan boy lovers. In reality, the real push against homosexuality comes not as a way to protect the word of God, as it were, but as a handy political strategy to make a convenient other for the congregation to rally against. But gay has always been here, and gay is here to stay. But this isn't a study of queer history. It's a study in pattern recognition, one that by the end of, you'll be able to see that some of the loudest anti-gay mouths just want a dick in it. And all that screaming is just a distraction from what they do behind closed doors. Our Father in Sunday Mass, and yes, Daddy in the bathhouse. I wasn't being hyperbolic with my last statement. I went back almost 60 years to 1970 looking for headlines of conservative preachers and priests being outed as gay. And not only is it relatively easy to establish a pattern of down low behavior among the religious right, there really is a trend of the most virulent, hateful voices being the ones with the most poppers in the pocket. Now, going forward, there will be a lot of conjecture and opinion, so to avoid any legal issues, I reached out to a colleague for a little assistance. Let me introduce you to DJ Allegedly, aka I Wasn't There, aka Mr. Redacted, aka. So when I'm speaking based on opinion or anecdotal evidence,
Allegedly.
from Reverend Lonnie Frisbee throwing it back in a chapel, to Ted Haggard having meth-fueled freak-offs with rent boys, to Eddie Long using his position to coerce men into relationships,
Allegedly.
there seem to be a lot of Christian men that fornicate with other men. It makes me wonder if they wrote their anti-gay speeches and propaganda before or after they rinsed their mouths out. You see, the down low serves as a shield. It allows for discreet links with others of discernible taste while basking in the benefits of straight male privilege. It's very convenient and serves its purpose anywhere it goes, from liberal cities with our soy, gluten-free macchiato muffins to deep rural areas with their Carhartt jackets and their John Deere hats. You see, they want you to believe that you can spot gay, that it has a dress code and ideology, and within very specific contexts, see ball or drag cultures there are, but you can't shine a light on gay and pick it out of a crowd. Let's face facts, this country is not that progressive. Compared to other Western nations, we're lacking in terms of empathy and understanding, especially towards queer and minority groups. We all know it. We see it from early in the condition little boys get that develops into an aversion to all things stereotypically feminine. We see it again when that aversion becomes a way to align themselves with the dominant perspective. Us good, them bad. Tough good, sensitive bad. These ideals get coupled with religious and social indoctrination regarding sexuality, and you end up with a powder keg of repression. You end up with men afraid to openly love men, and repression doesn't suppress desire, it enhances it. So how do you hide this desire? It's too much for the shield to handle alone. Well, you pick up a sword. In this context, that's what homophobia serves as, a sword. It's a two-pronged approach. Parry with the down low shield and attack with the homophobia sword. The strength of the attack coinciding with the strength of self-loathing and resentment that closeted men face.
And it comes as CNN's Cape File has uncovered details about Johnson's history with a group that promoted gay conversion therapy, a long debunked theory that gay people could be made straight. Here's some of what he said in the past.
It's time for an honest conversation about homosexuality. There's freedom to change if you want to.
Hey, here's a message for Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Pay attention, bud. This is for Mike Johnson. If you're not Mike Johnson, you can keep scrolling, or you can stay here and listen to what I have to say. Hey, Mike, you have until Wednesday to swear her in. Wednesday. Or I will release your Grindr profile and your IP address. I bring receipts, bitch. You're not going to sit there and actively work against LGBTQ rights and democracy. It is treason. Yeah, I'm calling you out for treason. You have until Wednesday to swear her in and let democracy take its course, or I will release your Grindr profile and your IP address.
So Mike can gobble Johnson so long as he maintains a nuclear family and supports legislation that harms queer people.
Allegedly.
Hell, sprinkle in some of that sanctimonious bullshit conservative Christians like to bear as a cross, and now you have a full suit of armor with articulating knees and a removable codpiece. You know, for those conventions they love so much. It's a prevailing pattern on the right. We're only a few years removed from Lindsey Graham as Lady G and their scandals.
Allegedly.
Think of how pleasant the world would be if they didn't put up so much of a fuss just to stay in the closet. But instead of standing up for themselves, they rather bow down to appease Alpha Daddy in the hopes of being pack leader one day. It's self-inflicted misery, and misery loves company. And a big part of why they're so damn miserable is because they resent the idea of queer people having the stones, the wherewithal to be ourselves. They want others to believe that being queer is a choice because they are choosing to pretend to be straight. Film director Kirby Dick took some of these guys to task in his film Outrage. Outrage shines a light on those politicians who have repeatedly voted against gay civil rights legislation, yet who are allegedly gay themselves. More than just a film, it's about who's hiding in the closet. The documentary is about hypocrisy and how it distorts the political process. In an interview, Mr. Dick is quoted as saying, "One of the things that attracted me to the film was the whole ethics of outing. What we do in our film is we don't out closeted politicians. We report on hypocrisy of closet politicians who vote anti-gay. I feel that it's not only something that one has a right to do, but I think it's a responsibility of journalists, and in this case, a documentary filmmaker. Because if you don't report on hypocrisy, then it just continues. Maintaining systems of prejudice and homophobia to insulate yourself from harm and redirect attention is like putting on a raincoat and setting off the emergency sprinklers.
This nigga went to get a motherfucking raincoat.
Don't pull the lever and you won't get wet." But Kirby continues, "Getting traditional media to run pieces on a subject has been difficult. It's sometimes what's described as the ick factor. They think they have a readership that's straight, maybe fundamentalist, and they just don't want to irritate them. Also, these outlets are owned by major corporations who do a lot of business on Capitol Hill. They only see the downside in reporting the truth when it comes to these powerful congressmen whom they could be writing about. But that's not going to help anything, especially in the age of social media. I've mentioned this before. The internet is a living organism with a long memory and a big fucking mouth. There's nothing that you can see or do on here that can't be exposed, which is why we have posthumous allegations of hate-filled bigots like Kirk paying top dollar for a Doll spicy site.
Charlie Kirk was subscribed to my spicy site. I know this may come as a shock to most of you because he was so adamant at speaking out against my community, but I felt it was right to bring this to the surface so everyone can see how Republican men are secretly in love with the dolls. Alright, here is a photo from my spicy site of the legal name taken from the credit card used to subscribe and how much money he spent on me.
Imagine that.
Allegedly.
On a trans woman's spicy site when he was supposedly living the American dream with kids and a perfect blonde-haired honeypot.
Allegedly.
I mean honey pie. And for the record, I don't believe in sanitizing someone's legacy just because they expired. Charlie Boy advocated for exactly what happened and I haven't lost a wink of sleep. Rotten piss. But we aren't here to talk about that egg-headed schmuck entirely. We're here to talk about the contradictions that allow for his ilk to create and support causes that harm LGBTQ rights while getting their tonsils tested on a regular. What's double fascinating for me is the pattern of straight men doing really gay shit to each other as a joke. It's insanely common among cis circles, especially among conservative men. Hell, the hit series Jackass made millionaires of dudes willing to debase, humiliate, and oftentimes do borderline homoerotic shit to each other. But nah, dude, not gay. So when you have men raised on public nut shots and discreet kisses among the lads, all you need is a little pressure to sway them from voting or supporting a common interest. And not always, but there genuinely is a pattern of the most openly homophobic men having homoerotic feelings themselves. Although the causes of homophobia are unclear, several psychoanalytic explanations have emerged from the idea of homophobia as an anxiety-based phenomenon. One psychoanalytic explanation is that anxiety about the possibility of being or becoming homosexual may be a major factor in homophobia. For example, De Cooper 1993 has asserted that homophobia is a result of the remnants of homosexuality and the heterosexual resolution of the Oedipal conflict. Whereas the notions are vague, the psychoanalytic theories usually postulate that homophobia is a result of repressed homosexual urges or a form of latent homosexuality. Psychoanalysts use the concept of repressed or latent homosexuality to explain the emotional malaise or irrational attitudes displayed by some individuals who feel guilty about their erotic interests and struggle to deny or express homosexual impulses. In fact, when placed in a situation that threatens to excite their own unwanted homosexual thoughts, they overact with panic or anger. Specifically, the study was designed to investigate whether homophobic men show more sexual arousal to homosexual cues than non-homophobic men, as suggested by psychoanalytic theory. The results of the study indicate that individuals who score on a homophobic range and admit negative attitudes toward homosexuality demonstrate significant sexual arousal to male homosexual erotic stimuli.
Ha! Gay!
As I alluded to earlier in my reference to Spartans taking turns on each other, some men don't deem gay acts as gay if it's part of a domination ritual or if it involves someone being the butt of a joke. Ball taps are a good example. It's okay for them to touch a buddy's junk if it makes them wince in pain, but not okay to touch a buddy's junk if they both like it. Or if that bro is a femboy. Groper says what? In my Femboys and Fascism video, I glossed over the forced femme community, and almost all of these dudes are on the down low. And I say dudes because forced feminization is a sexual kink involving roleplay of cishet male forced to undergo training as a woman. This generally includes wigs, makeup, and feminine intimate attire, lace 90s and whatnot. The ultimate idea is that the forced femme is such a failure as a cishet male that the only logical decision is to become a woman and serve an alpha male. Hang on, there's more to it. I just mentioned training, right? Well, the curriculum of these academies involves an absurd amount of hypnosis, cuck, and especially BBC content, and I'm not talking Doctor Who. The kissing cousin of the forced femme kink is the BBC fetish, which may as well stand for big black concubine, as it's only the black man's body that's idealized, simultaneously worshipping the onyx obelisk and maintaining a stable of studs. That's a mixed metaphor, but it's not as mixed up as the sensibilities of those who participate in these fetishes. It's not just sad chads. Karen has her Queen of Spades tattoo in her breeding kink. Chody Cody is locked in a chastity cage emblazoned with a spade logo identifying him as subservient to the black man that's plowing his wife like his restitution for never getting that promised 40 acres.
Boss!
It's a toxic blend of misogyny and racism that helps perpetuate a culture of self-loathing and harmful stereotypes. Ultimately, these retroactive retrobates are using misogyny and racism to masturbate.
I love my wife, and I'm not gay, and I'm not, and that's what's weird about this, to have your sexuality question and your moral fiber question and all that.
Now we get into the real down low. And I say real because the down low is another black term co-opted without any real grasp of how to use it in context. But the OG context for the down low refers to straight presenting black and Latin men that pursue the sneaky link that we mentioned. The need for discretion is self-explanatory. If a person does not feel safe in openly expressing their sexual desires, they just find sneaky and oftentimes risky ways to explore them. This in turn inevitably feeds into cycles of men suppressing their desires, finding discreet or down low ways to explore them, and in some very troubling cases, a deep-seated resentment and self-loathing coalesce into a fear of being outed, which leads to harm in queer communities, specifically mine. Black trans women end up taking the brunt of the damage. We get brutalized because some trade didn't want his friends to know he plays with dolls. And black trans women are the ones whose missing person cases aren't looked into, whose sexual history is used as an excuse not only for harm, but for an overall lack of empathy. Personally, I don't think DL men deserve any nookie. I didn't think they deserved any before, but definitely not when they make jokes at trans women's expense or refuse to acknowledge our existence unless they want some intimacy. It's something that absolutely infuriates me, especially with black men. Look, maybe it's just a tism, but my brain will never understand how one disenfranchised group can disregard another, especially when that group is within their own. We know how rough it is growing up as a black male. We know how rough it was for that femme kid that couldn't or wouldn't butch it up at the playground. Hell, we know the truth about our favorite celebs, but we all ignore it for the sake of a standard of black masculinity that does white supremacy's work for it. Good example, I'm into stand-up comedy, and two of the all-time greats belong to the African diaspora, Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy. Now, like most male comedians in the 80s, they had a few gay jokes to toss up to the crowd. Like Chum, just enough to start a feeding frenzy. But Eddie likes to play with dolls.
Allegedly.
You see, Mr. Big Mouth was picked up for soliciting favors from a trans woman on a corner.
Deputies from West Hollywood Station were working in an unmarked car in a prostitution abatement zone in West Hollywood. They saw a Land Cruiser being driven by a male stop and pick up an individual that they recognized as a transsexual prostitute. They followed the vehicle for a short ways and then they stopped it. They contacted the two occupants. They found the two occupants to be Eddie Murphy and the suspect. Both of the individuals were questioned by the deputies. The deputies determined that there was no evidence of illegal activity occurring at the time. However, the occupant that was picked up by Eddie Murphy was determined to have a $15,000 warrant. The warrant was for a probation violation on a prostitution arrest.
Eddie, of course, claimed that he was just offering them a ride home, and home must be what he calls his... Never mind. But the queer community noticed. Honey, we always notice.
Only reason why they keep girls like me in the closet, I'll change everyone's way of thinking about our lifestyle. You got big time celebrities that go around in their cars picking up trans having sex with them and then getting on national TV making fun of them. Our whole world is being run by undercover fags that run around talking about how straight they are.
But Eddie gets to keep his man card because he played dumb and ignored his truth. Now with Richard Pryor, it was like people are actually trying to ignore that he was an openly bisexual man. Like, openly. Richard has had several queer hookups with everybody, including Marlon Brando. Yeah, The Godfather got cracked by Richard Pryor.
Allegedly.
Who cracked who is a matter of allegation, but one thing that's not alleged is Pryor's open admittance to slurping on gherkins. Richard Pryor has a tight five about jonesing for a meat stick to snack on that everyone seems to forget about.
Real men, I suck dick. You can get a habit from sucking dick. You know, become a dick junkie. You can only do it maybe 3 times. You do it more than that, you get a habit.
So you would think that with all the evidence of manly men, the men that men admire, being into queer shit, things would loosen up. Because best believe it's not just film and comedy. The truth is that there are many gay men in hip-hop living double lives. A statistical probability that at least half a dozen of the popular major rappers are either gay or queer aligning. Rapper Lil J went moderately viral after footage of him in a prison dalliance went public. We all know Tyler, the Creator, isn't above a sus bar or reference. He has a little sugar in his tank.
Allegedly.
Hell, musician Khaled just came out after being outed in the summer of 2024. Khaled then expressed his disappointment that people weaponized how vulnerable he was. And that vulnerability is why the closet exists. Why it's so hard for down low men to admit what makes them hard. But there have been stories over the years, carefully redacted of course, that allude to men living gay lives, and this is going back damn near 40 years. Hiding in hip-hop on a down low in the entertainment industry from music to Hollywood is a memoir from Trey Dean, a gay man working in the Los Angeles music scene. And as he gets into that underground gay hip-hop soul culture seemed to be thriving since, well, ever. Hell, long since before hip-hop. But Dean's book describes a world where many industry executives and some artists are leading secret gay lives, which are often obvious to everyone but rarely talked about. And despite some false names, the book contains enough information that it will undoubtedly spark a frenzy of speculation as to who or some of these characters are in real life. For example, Dean describes Lola, a singer who was a lesbian and had to keep her sexuality secret, and Gus, a male rapper who appeared in television in a typical gangster style yet hid a secret gay life. And in the book, there are graphic accounts of intimacy between men in hip-hop that he participated in or witnessed. It's a pretty engaging read. I'm wary of giving too much detail that could allude to who is referring to within these various trysts that he participated in or witnessed. That's not really my place. Remember, I'm all for talking shit after they're outed, not feeding into what pushes them out the closet. Unless, of course, you're self-hating queer that's pushing legislation that hurts queer people, in which case, fuck you twicey. As his story continues, he details meeting other down low men in hip-hop and television, and the most intriguing part is the support system involved. Now, gay support circles run deep and are expansive, even in realms where almost everyone is in a closet, so that part isn't what fascinated me. What got me was how the Hollywood machine, with all the cynicism, can still have an enclave of folks that really look out for each other. You mix that in with ingrained homophobia and you can see where the gay conspiracy theories come in, especially the gay humiliation rituals, which is just the ashy cousin of the emasculation of black men by putting them in dress theory. Essentially is all root misogyny. The theory being that black men are emasculated in exchange for fame and fortune, but it's way simpler than that. There are hetero predators and obviously there are gay predators, but just because there are a lot of butch gay dudes in the industry on a down low doesn't mean there's a grand conspiracy. It just means that gay folks can be just as creepy as the straights. But there's this extra stigma surrounding queerness that somehow makes a consensual link between two men as salacious as a freak-off party. Two dudes can't kiss without causing an issue or conspiracy allegations, like when Wayne kissed Birdman, and yeah, weird for him to kiss a dude he calls his daddy, but that's a different thing. Nah, fuck that. Let's look at that in a minute. This nigga was smooching on Wayne and Turk, another young dude from Cash Money, when they were teenagers.
You and Wayne had like a kiss thing going on.
Facts. I know you got a child. You probably kiss him. You probably got a son and you kiss him.
Yeah.
You heard me? I always looked at Wayne as my son, and I always looked at it like, because I was in the streets, and I thought this might be the last time they ever see me. That's where that shit came from, started from, and I always today look at Wayne as my child.
Birdman is bisexual, in my opinion. He is in his too, at least according to a post that has since been deleted. But, you know, apparently the post was hacked, so...
Allegedly.
I guess. From what I just told you, what was the bigger focus for you right then? Rhetorical question. I know a large swath of you focus on gender and not age because deviance is understood and somehow more allowable if it's hetero. Queer creepos get their queerness focused on. This only serves to feed the closet monster, feeding a cycle of judgment that focuses on the wrong shit. Being on a down low isn't a crime. Being queer doesn't make someone a bad person. Being queer on a down low and in a position to harm the community, however, is bullshit. Look, I don't know how many straights are going to be left in this audience, but if you're curious about what to do with this information, just move forward by caring less. Caring less about what your homie thinks and less about what your homie does. Because unless you're trying to smash, why do you really care?